We now take a look at the newspapers and what is contained therein this morning. We begin our perusal with the Daily Nation, and this is the headline story: Ruto's new salary plan for workers. President William Ruto and his deputy Rigathi Gachagua, and this is the caption accompanying this image. And COTU Secretary General Francis Atwoli and other leaders yesterday at Uhuru Gardens in Nairobi during the Labor Day celebrations. This particular image, this photograph was taken by Dennis Onsongo of The Nation, and the Daily Nation details his pledge. And President William Ruto announced a new salaries policy that will set equal pay for workers in public and private sectors, even as he defended extra pension and medical deductions that have shrunk workers' pay slips. Sharing the front page is this highlight on a story on Raila Odinga protests. Rivals dig in amid calls for restraint. President Ruto and Azimio chief Raila Odinga have maintained hardline positions over today's planned opposition protests, even as calls for restraint dominated Labor Day celebrations. Also on the front page of the Daily Nation, at the very top, cult strangled members. Deadly belief: some of the victims of the cult operating in Kilifi's Shakahola village were killed by suffocation and strangulation. Post-mortem examination conducted yesterday on some of the 110 bodies exhumed has revealed. In particular, this happened with children, given the postmortems, what the postmortems already done indicate. I also see on the front page, Afrexim Bank disburses 408 billion shillings loan to Kenya. The Africa Export and Import Bank will today start the disbursement of a $3 billion economic support loan for Kenya, handing some temporary relief to a country facing deep financial headwinds. I see they've also highlighted on the front page a sports story, and Mikel Arteta: Arsenal is still in Premier League title race. On a lighter note, I saw a meme of a fellow carrying tables on his back. Looks like that joke about Arsenal being top of the table remains ripe. Okay, let's take a look now at the other dailies. Let's see what the Standard has for us this morning. And the headline story also has to do with workers, and it is: workers go home empty-handed amid protest talk. Employees expected to focus on the high cost of living and probably get a pay rise, but speaker after speaker took their time to rail at opposition over planned demonstrations today. The image they have on their front pages of President William Ruto and the COTU Secretary General Francis Atwoli. President William Ruto has a word with COTU Secretary General Francis Atwoli during Labor Day celebrations at Uhuru Gardens in Nairobi yesterday, and also sharing the front pages this story, how this highlighted story, how Githunguri is guarding his billions in death. I'm just going to read the snippet that is accompanying that headline. Court papers estimate worth at 1.8 billion shillings. Apart from iconic Lillian Towers, Stanley Githunguri also owned a 9.6-acre property in Karen worth 700 million shillings. He has other properties in Nairobi's upmarket estates of Spring Valley, Lavington and Muthaiga, as well as shares in many NSE companies. He has entrusted his empire to daughters who will execute the will. I see also on the front page, but on the bottom left here, inside Mackenzie's doomsday teachings, using the Bible, pastor made claims that border on heresy, but his congregation grew. At the very top here of the Standard, I see Murathe: cost of living likely to sink Ruto government. Chaos at Sudan port as locals flee. And will Arsenal sing the blues at Emirates? Okay, so let's now take a look at the Star before we get into the Taifa Leo and the Business Daily. And headline story on the front page of the Star that is before me here is defiant Azimir dares Ruto as cops ban demo. Raila says protest to start at 6 a.m. intends to present 4 petitions. And showdown: tough talking president vows to protect property. I also see at the very top here, City Clinic offers Kenyan amputees fast 3D printed legs in 3 days. Interesting story there. And I see also on the front page, Shakahola probe to include human organ harvesting, something Florence Machio had suspected the last time she was here. The probe into the cult deaths in Shakahola will extend to possible organ harvesting. Interior CS Kithure Kindiki yesterday said the government will lay bare all the details of the probe, including cases where bodies might be found without some organs. There have been claims some of the 110 bodies so far exhumed have vital organs missing. Nyanza flooding. More than 4,500 households have been affected by raging floods in Nyando, with fears of increased numbers as rains continue to pound different regions across the country. In Nyanza, villages have been marooned, houses submerged, with water covering access road. Okay, so I will leave the star there and quickly pull up here Taifa Leo and Business Daily. Let's start with the Business Daily, and this is their front page headline story, and it reads, money from Kenyans abroad dips for the first time in 13 years. Inflationary pressures in the US squeeze remittances. Transfers dropped by 1.1 billion shillings in quarter to March. This report by Kefa Mwirure. For more details, visit epaper.nation.africa on your device and you'll be able to purchase any of the newspapers that the Nation Media Group publishes. Banker John Ngumi pays 111 million shillings for his telecom deal fees. This report is by NTV, or now the NMG, Business and Technology editor Julian's Amboko. Investment banker John Ngumi last month paid a tax of 111.9 million shillings from his juicy fee for advising the government's acquisition of Telkom Kenya Limited for 6.2 billion shillings. Let's take a look at the ticker now. And minimum wage intact despite high cost of living. Workers have missed out on a pay increase despite the high cost of living that is squeezing household budgets. President William Ruto was yesterday silent on calls by the workers' lobby to review the minimum wage. Stanchart cuts jobs for 8th straight year on automation. Standard Chartered Bank Kenya last spent 209 million shillings on redundancies, marking the 8th straight year of trimming its workforce amid an increased switch to digital banking. The lender discloses in its latest annual report that its workforce dropped by 59 to 1,061. And finally, on the ticker, Treasury bond yields surge exposes investors to losses. Treasury bond yields in the secondary market have risen to as much as 16.5%, exposing investors to losses from the sharp discounting of the security prices. The rising returns are largely attributable to interest rate pressures. And let us see back page of the Business Daily. This by James Muraguri. Policymakers should step up their efforts to curb inflation, boost domestic resource mobilization, and enact pro-growth reforms. The title there is MPs should focus on high-impact sectors in budget. And finally, let's take a look at, I saved the best for last, Taifa Leo, my best. Thoroughly enjoy it. Ruto Arusha Ahadi Zaidi, and on the front page image thereof, Francis Atwoli Kotu, Secretary General, President William Ruto, and Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua. What does the caption read? Rais William Ruto jana aliorodhesha ahadi tele kuhusu mipango yake ya maendeleo itakayomwezesha kuletea Wakenya pesa mfukoni. And I see at the very top here, Kivumbi leo Azimio akiapa kuingiza wafuasi katikati mwa jiji la Nairobi. Raila alisisitiza waandamanaji hawatabeba silaha au kuharibu mali. And then I also see on the side here kwa vidokezo Shakahola, baadhi ya wadhiriwa walinyongwa. Uchunguzi wa mapema wa wanapatholojia wabaini vifo vilitokana na ukosefu wa oksijeni. And then I will leave the Taifa Leo there, so we have a sense of what the top stories are post-Labor Day. Good morning, ladies. With me in studio already, we have Florence Machio, women's rights campaigner, and psychology specialist, Lois Noel, in studio with me. Lois, I think we walked into studio at about the same time. How are the roads when you were coming in?
By the time I was coming, the police were already getting in, quite a number. Got me a bit anxious, but also feeling a little secure that they're already manning the various places.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about you, Florence?
History tells me, history of Maandamano, that the presence of police does not necessarily mean that it's going to be safe. For me, every time I see GSU, I know it's going to be chaos. So as I drove in, I saw at Hazel last roundabout a big truck, and they're coming out of their truck, and I wish it would be Maandamano the way I know it. The way when we're going out for women's rights activities and we're saying, you know, we demand this and we demand this, usually the police align themselves with us, work with us to just ensure nobody infiltrates our Maandamano as we go wherever we want to go and give petition. And usually you give your route, you know, where you're going to go. And so having the police there, for me, it no longer makes me feel safe. It just makes me realize that we're going to have running battles today. And so maybe we will hide here until everything is quiet.
You don't know what it took to get some of my panelists in. They're like, Raila said 6.
So you'll give us a working area for us to work from here today.
No problem. We'll accommodate you. I expect that we have joining us virtually Dr. Mary Goretti Akinyi Otieno. She's sociologist and has a background in anthropology as well. And Angela Minayo Kiktonet. And let me just check whether she's messaged me anything different from what she did, because initially she had asked if she could also join virtually. I told her town looks good so far. I hope I won't be forced to eat my words. Yes, I'm told we have Dr. Mary Goretti. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Olivia.
How are things where you are?
Where I am is quiet. Of course, I'm from the confines of my home, waiting to go to class in 3 hours' time. Yeah. Oh,
you have class in 3 hours' time?
Yes, yes, yes.
All right. We're struggling to hear her a little bit. If we could make it a bit more, slightly more audible, that would be fantastic. So, ladies, last week we began a conversation, and that was indecent exposure, the trend of you know, people sharing intimate videos, pictures of persons, at least as far as we know, in the public eye, either to embarrass them or extort them. I don't know what the motivation is. We saw Millie Odhiambo when that happened with Millicent Omanga stand up in Parliament and say this cannot be tolerated. There needs to be attached, because she said she's not a proponent of the death penalty. She said life imprisonment. So when Angela gets here, she can tell us a little bit about the legal provisions that are already in place, the Cyber Crimes Act, as well as you know, your right to privacy, and perhaps what might require tweaking to make things more stringent. But also another question that arose the last time we were here was, and this one was raised by Bernard Ndong, the sports editor, NTV, and he was asking, is this evidence of moral decay? I think that's where we left it, if I recall correctly. Is this evidence, Lois, of moral, like have we further sunk into the mire of moral decay, or what is this? Is this simply playing out in the public domain? What happens in the online domain? What already happens, the prejudices that already exist offline?
Yeah, thank you, Olive. It's a very kind of a dynamic issue in terms of where we would want to lean it on. But we know with every advancement in life comes the challenges that it brings and opportunities that it also brings together for everyone who is using that kind of space. So in technology, just as any other advancement that came, there is an opportunity for people who might not be well, or who have, you know, we are big on certain mental challenges, to be able to use them against anyone, or to use it, to misuse it for that matter. And therefore, you know, I was reflecting actually on this issue, and I said, what's the best analogy that I can give? And I looked at fire, you know. Fire is so good. Fire can be used so well. But fire can also be the most devastating thing. Now, depending on what kind of fire you're using and what you're using it for, sometimes it dies down. Sometimes it only dies down when the source of that fire goes out, like say gas. Sometimes circumstances say if you're using electricity, maybe it will go off, but some of it burn for, you know, for as long as you keep that fire on. So I'm looking at the digital platform and this digital space. It is like something that is on, and anyone can light it and keep it going on. And therefore, it's very important we come to the reality that as long as you are someone who is a celebrity or a leader, and we also talked about, I think Florence is big on, you're a woman, chances are that people will use this digital space to do certain things that they might not do to other people.
Yeah.
And so that's the reality that we have. And then I asked myself, are there still people who have succeeded in managing this social media, however dynamic it is? Now, what have they done so that they are not in this kind of spaces? And then maybe we can pick up from those evidence-based kind of management strategies that others have used. The number two, there are other people, because of their nature and the way they are and the threats they have to certain people, they might not escape this kind of, you know, exposure, and people looking for every sort of issue to be able to just cast it out there. And then I ask myself, if you're aware that you're such a person, then what should you do for you to be able to be ready? You know, ready, just like, you know, we all walk around and we know we can die, but how ready are we? How ready do we get for that? So it's important for people, certain people, to be able to get ready. And that means then you've got to sort of like know who you are and what the dangers and dynamics around you are. And then you sort of like just do some self-protection and get also some support just in case certain things are to happen. Kind of take up some emotional insurance so that you know you can lean on it when you have this kind of things, because we are human, and anything that of that nature is bound to really, you know, hurt us emotionally.
All right. Yeah. Florence, I was doing some reading on this, and while the high-profile individuals quite readily catch our attention, the data based on a UN report I was glancing at yesterday, and I'll pull it up on my touch screen, but it appears my touch screen keeps quitting, so I think it's still recovering from the Labor Day sherehe. And I tweeted this. So this is according to the UN Women's Gender Snapshot of 2022, and it says women's exclusion from the digital world has shaved $1 trillion from the GDP of low and middle income countries in the last decade, a loss that will grow to 1.5 trillion US dollars by 2025 without action. Reversing this trend, and this is something that was raised by Dr. Mirigoretti the last time she was here, reversing this trend will require tackling the problem of online violence, which a study of 51 countries revealed 38% of women had personally experienced. How prevalent a problem in your experience, because you work in the SGBV space, yes. Florence,
yes.
Is this?
It's quite prevalent, and I think what we are now lacking is data to track online violence and gender segregated data, so that we can know these are the many numbers of women, these are the numbers of men. Mostly you will find women are affected when we look at anecdotal evidence. And I just pulled up I'm happy you talked about the digital economy and the fact that with COVID, a lot of women, what we call now the gig economy, went online doing many things. I teach you how to cook, I get more online followers, and I'm making money out of it. So it's a space that needs to be kept safe for women. And one of the things, I know Honorable Harriet Chiga is in Geneva today, and one of the conversation is reducing the gender parity that denies women an opportunity to grow economically. So that's one of the things that they'll be discussing. But pulling back in terms of evidence, I was just looking at social media, and my sister here talked about where can we find evidence to see what has happened and if we could borrow a leaf. And I was looking at Zimbabwe. There's a research done by Data 2X. It is estimated, this is as recent as March of 2023, that over 70% of women have been exposed to or experienced online violence and harassment. And this typically happens, of course, on social media, but it greatly inhibits women's participation, either economically or otherwise, online. And one of the things that they did in Zimbabwe is through the International Foundation for Electrical Systems, IFES, they decided to create a tool to be able to track this digital violence. And they called it Violence Against Women in Elections Online Social Media Analysis Tool. It's called Brandwatch. And I'm thinking maybe this is something that we need to employ in this country because it's becoming worse every single day. And if I could quote them, they said that we developed a hate speech lexicon identifying words used on the internet to perpetuate hate speech and violence towards women. From the lexicon, we could find public threats of physical, sexual, and psychosocial violence towards women on social media platforms. So I think we need to be deliberate, just the way we are looking for data to inform development in all areas. We need to look for data online to be able to showcase how big a problem this is. At the moment, we'll be waiting for one case and then another case, and then we talk about it. But I think we need to be very deliberate in analyzing the social media space and protecting women and girls and children against online violence. And I think we all know that it's also through online violence that pedophiles also prey on children who are online for whatever reason. And you remember our children are COVID children, they were constantly online. And so also the perpetrators knew that children are now vulnerable, infiltrating Google Classrooms and all that. So we really need to go beyond even just women. We really need to go beyond that and create a tool to collect data that will inform development around protection on social media.
All right. And I need to take a break, but this is something that Dr. Mary Goretti had raised when we were last here, and she said how it impacts the economy and the economic empowerment of women. Finally, we are cooperating. And here is the tweet I was making reference to. Women's exclusion from the digital world has shaved $1 trillion from the GDP of low and middle income countries in the last decade. Reversing this trend will require tackling online violence, which a study of 51 countries revealed 38% of women had personally experienced. And for those who are just joining us, this is the topic of conversation, Digit All, because this was the theme of the International Women's Day last month. 2 months ago. We are now in May. Mob injustice, online and ICT facilitated harassment and abuse. And KFCB actually released a statement, called for a press conference the day after we had the show on this very same issue. And it was on the rampant sharing of inappropriate audiovisual content on social